Welcome. Hello. I am so glad that you are here with me today in this training because who doesn't want a better sex life? Who doesn't want intimacy to come more easily and naturally? Who doesn't want this to get better the longer you're in a relationship? Yeah, I know. I am so excited that you're here because one, this information is transformational for women in increasing drive and enjoying sex more so that you want to do it more often. But two, because their partners also need to know this stuff. Because probably all of our sex ed was bad. It was all bad. So most of us were not taught about how female sexual arousal actually works, and this is essential for long-term relationships. So I am so excited that you're here. Okay, what we're going to cover today is we're going to talk about the different types of sex drive. Because there are different types and they show up differently for men and women because the reality is that the system is just different. So we're going to talk about this so that you can start recognizing and cueing in how these work for both of you. We're also going to do one of my favorite things, which is we're going to debunk some myths about women's sexuality. And we're going to talk about what's actually going on so that you have more grounding in how this actually works and what you can do about it. So that there's not so much shame and judgment and guilt, none of that. We're also going to talk about some pieces of female anatomy that are super important to know because the more you know about how this system works, either for you or your partner, the more understanding you have about how to stimulate this. Because at the end of the day, sex drive is a physical system. So we just need to know how it works. And what we're going to do as we go is we're going to have an open conversation and we're going to have some fun with this because talking about sex can be scary. It can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. I am a firm believer that talking about sex should be like talking about what's for dinner, but it's only hard and scary because we don't do it. Or we only do it when there are problems, so then we only fight about it. So we're going to talk about all of this today. We're going to make it easier. We're going to have some fun and make this more enjoyable of a conversation from the get-go. A couple of pieces before we dive in. So the work that I do is biologically based. So what that means is I do speak in terms of male and female because we're talking about anatomy today. And I work primarily with heterosexual couples in long-term relationships. So this is the context for the work that I do, and this is how I view the problems, these issues, the work that I do with couples. And so that's how I'm going to be talking about it today. Okay, so let me actually introduce myself so you know who I am and why I'm here talking to you about your sex life. I am Erin Hall. I'm a sex therapist. I have been for 10 years, and I'm the owner of Holistic Health. I am also the creator of the Desire to Fire signature program, where I help women who are struggling with low desire remove the blocks that are inhibiting their sex drive, increase desire and arousal, and get to experience deeper intimacy and connection in their relationships. And we're going to talk about a lot of this today. It's going to be a lot of fun. And this is my dog, Leo. I'm an avid dog lover. I have a virtual practice who he's often, yeah, he's actually laying here in the background. So he's my supervisor. He might join us today. But let's dive in and talk about this because one of the main questions that I get asked when people hear that I'm a sex therapist is they say, "Oh, interesting. How did you get into this?" So, what originally brought me to this field is that for me, sex was really painful. And it caused a lot of relationship issues because obviously I didn't want to do it. It felt like a chore. I had a lot of feelings around it, but I didn't understand. Everybody's all fired up about this, right? Clearly, there's something to it. It's in every movie and on every TV show and in every ad and every rap song, right? People are fired up about it. It's everywhere. So I felt like I was missing something. So I started to ask questions very subtly to my friends, to other women, because this is very hard to talk about. So I would just put out feelers. I'm like, are other people experiencing this? What's going on? And what I discovered is that a lot of women are struggling with this. Yes, some with pain, but some with low desire, lack of interest. Some with feeling like it was a chore and the guilt that that brought up. Some with the relationship dynamics that come with this, right? Like the classic, well, he has a high drive and I have a low drive, and we don't know how to manage that. So many women were struggling, and I now know from research that almost 50% of women just deal with low desire in long-term relationships. Almost half of us out here are just struggling, and that's just what's reported. So we know that it's actually way more than that. But half of us are just going through the motions. And 80% of women have sex when they're not in the mood. So I was learning this, I was having these conversations, and I was like, what is this? Why does this not get to be fun for women? What is happening? And as I started to ask questions to providers, to experts in the field, right, I couldn't find helpful answers. I talked to my primary care doctor, and she was like, yeah, that happens. Just use more lube. And I talked to my gyno, who said the same thing, and she said, have a glass of wine and relax. I went to Google, and I just got the 10 tips to spice things up, and none of this helped. And I am not hating on my doctors, right? They were great, but they didn't know this stuff either, is what I found over time. But I didn't want to believe that this is just how things are for women. It was being normalized, and I was like, no, I don't want to believe that this is just how it is for us, right? That men have these great sexual experiences and enjoy it and get to connect through this and love experiencing love and affection this in these ways, and women just have to tolerate it and get through it. I didn't want to accept that. So I went down this rabbit hole. In some ways, I think I'm still down the rabbit hole, but I've done workshops and retreats and pelvic floor physical therapy and couples therapy. I even got a master's in human sexuality trying to figure this shit out because I was not willing to accept that this is just how things are for women because I was seeing them suffer. They're suffering because, yes, sex is important for the longevity of long-term relationships, right? A good sex life is important long-term, but it's more than that. It's the deeper connection and intimacy that come with a good sex life that all of us deserve to experience. Because over time, what happens when sex causes stress in a relationship is that it causes distance and conflict and tension. And it often becomes that one thing that you can't even talk about because it's that one thing that you always end up fighting about. And over time, what happens is this thing called the bristle effect, where you pull away from any touch, even if it's non-sexual, right? Like a hand on your back or an arm around your waist or a lingering kiss because it might lead to more, right? It's too high stakes. Any touch might lead to more, so I feel like I have to shut it out because I'm tired of being the bad guy and saying no. I'm tired of seeing my partner feel rejected and unloved and think that I don't even care about him or find him attractive or all of these things that come up when that happens. So what happens over time is that you end up shutting out all affection, sexual and non-sexual, shutting it all out. That takes a big toll on feeling loved and connected. Because now it's not just about sex, it's about the whole connection and intimacy in your relationship. So, yes, enjoying sex and having it be a point of connection is super important, but we're talking about a whole lot more than that when we're talking about somebody's sex life. We're talking about their ability to feel that deeper level of intimacy and that sense of love and acceptance for both partners. Okay. So, on this journey, I discovered, unsurprisingly, that there's a lot of misinformation out there about sex, which didn't actually come as a surprise to me because sex is pretty hard to talk about and it's still pretty taboo in our culture, even when it's going well, let alone when there's an issue. So there's a lot of misinformation. There's a huge lack of understanding around women's sexual response specifically, because this works differently than men's. We're going to talk about that in a second. But this conversation isn't happening with women. So they don't know how it works, right? Neither do the men, neither do their partners, because that conversation's not happening with them either. But what happens for the women when they don't know how this works and they see the sex on TV and in movies, and they're like, well, that's not how it works for me, is that it leads to a lot of unhelpful beliefs. It gets internalized. And one of the main things that I hear from the women that I work with, because it doesn't show up like it does in movies, is that they feel like there's something wrong with them. The main fear that I hear from my women is that they're broken. They say, I worry that I'm broken and I'm not going to be able to fix this because it's me. But nobody's talking about that. So they try the lube and the wine and it doesn't work. And after over time, trying all of these things that are quote unquote supposed to work that all the experts are telling you to try, the logical conclusion is it must be me. No, that is all wrong. That is all wrong. But what happens is that a lot of all of our expectations about sex, men and women, is that they're based on unrealistic standards. I call them the sexpectations. It's the expectations we have about sex. They're the shoulds. How often I should have sex. How long sex should last. What positions we should be having sex in. What my body should look like. How long it should take me to orgasm. That I should orgasm every time. That sex should be great every time. There's 1,000 more. You probably have 1,000 more that come to mind. We all have these. And I think one of the reasons that we have them is that we all want to feel normal. We kind of use them, we try to use them as a marker, right? Like as long as I'm within these limits, I'm okay. My relationship is okay. Because this can cause a lot of stress. So it's a way to measure this. But here's the problem with wanting to be normal. There's no normal when it comes to sex. I get asked this all the time from my couples. They come to see me and they say, Erin, how often should we be having sex? And I say, I don't know. I can't answer that. Once, I could say once a week, right? And for some couples, they're like, great, that sounds wonderful and that would be great for us. And for some couples, they're like, well, that's way too much and that's super stressful compared to what we're doing now. And for some, they're like, that's not enough. We need more connection. Every couple is different. But this is where the expectations come in because we're looking to be quote unquote normal. They're external, they're unrealistic. And so they get filed away in our brains as the standard for sex that are not even based in reality. They're not even real. This is where the expectations come from, the myths. So let's bust some of these and have some fun doing this. One of my favorite things, because knowing this information can truly be life-changing for women and for their partners. We all just need to know how this works. So raise your hand if you have ever heard or believed this first one. This is a big one. We're starting with the first one. The myth that sex should be spontaneous. I just want it to be spontaneous. I want it to be easy. I want it to just be happen to be natural. Right? Fun fact. Sex is never spontaneous, and it never was. It might feel like it was early in the relationship because back in those early days, you would plan a date night, right? Plan a date for next week on Friday night. We're going to go out. So leading up to that, we're finding a restaurant and texting back and forth about how excited we are. And the day of, it's like, I can't wait to see you tonight. And then you're getting ready for the date and you take the full shower that takes approximately 18 hours, right? You're shaving your legs, you're doing your hair and your makeup, you're putting on deodorant so you smell good. You put on nice underwear, not the shit that's been in your drawer for 15 years, because I see you and I know that that happens, right? And then on the date, you're having like new experiences to get together at this restaurant. You're eating good food, you're flirting, there's banter. Guess what? That was all foreplay. It was all anticipation. It was excitement to see this person spend time together, and you did prep to feel good about yourself and be engaged in this connection. It wasn't spontaneous. It just didn't feel like work that it might later on in the relationship because over time we get comfortable, which is good, right? But it also means that we don't show up in the same way that we used to. But nothing just happens in relationships. Nothing. Anything that you want to happen takes effort. Even the fun stuff. I don't just find myself on vacation. I have to take time off and I have to budget and I have to figure out where I'm going and I have to book the hotel and book the flights, right? I have to do all of that. So even the fun stuff, I do have to work at because it's not going to happen if I don't put forth some effort. But this one is a really big one in relationships because wanting sex to just happen, to be spontaneous, sets women up for failure. It sets their partners up for failure because this isn't how it works for them. It ignores how the system works for women. But I'm guessing that nobody ever taught you that, how the system works. So let's talk about that because there is a difference between desire and arousal. So let's start there. Desire is my interest in sex, right? It's like my mental interest in sex. It's in my brain. And arousal is the blood flowing in my body. It's like my body's interest, my sex drive actually kicking on in my body. And this shows up in two different ways. There's two different types of sex drive. One is called spontaneous desire. And this one tends to be a whole lot more common in men. This is what we tend to think of. It's what we see in movies. It's like the whole I feel horny, I seek out sex with my partner. Right? My interest, my mental interest, leads to my physical arousal. But then there's another kind, and it's called responsive desire. And this one is a whole lot more common in women. Think of this as the same system, but working in the opposite direction. With responsive desire, it's my arousal, my blood flowing in my body responding that leads to my interest in sex, my mental interest. So when people have this type of desire, they need something sexy and fun to happen first so that the sex drive can respond to it. That's why it's called responsive. It needs to respond. So the sexy spoon, right? The hand on the, like slapping the butt on the way by, right? Like saying, hey, you look good tonight. It's not enough for that system to respond to, right? So you need to settle into this and figure out some ways to stimulate. And we're going to talk about this in a second because you need something to spark the arousal. Right? At night, when you're laying in bed and you roll over to your wife and you're doing the sexy spoon and she says, I'm not in the mood, it's because nothing has sparked the arousal yet, which is frustrating for you as a husband, right? And also as a wife, that when you do that mental check-in, you're not in the mood because it hasn't been kicked on yet, right? So often it's not actually low desire. It's that your desire isn't being stimulated, which gets even worse when you wait and hope that it'll be spontaneous and hope that it'll just show up. Because when that happens, you're gonna be waiting. Because that's just not how it works. There's a really good analogy by sex therapist Christine Hyde. She talks about it in a way that I think is helpful to conceptualize it. So let me give you this example. She talks about it like a friend inviting you to a party. This is for responsive desire, right? A friend invites you to a party. It's your best friend. You love spending time with them. Parties are fun. So you're like, yeah, sounds great. They're like, I'm having a party on Saturday. They're like, I'm having a party on Saturday. And you're like, great, I'll be there. And then as Saturday starts to get closer, you start to think about the logistics. I gotta shower. I gotta do my hair and makeup. I gotta put on real pants. What is the traffic gonna be like? What kind of food are they gonna have? God, I'm already so tired from the week. And suddenly that party does not sound super appealing. I just want to stay home in my PJs, put on Netflix, hang out. But I go to the party because I said that I would and because my friend is important to me. And once I'm there, I'm listening to the music and I'm eating good food and I'm dancing and I'm laughing and I'm really glad that I came. And I really have a good time. But the party has to be enjoyable for, right? And we'll come back to that in a minute. But think about how different this is from how we typically talk about desire. Because the entire way that we talk about intimacy assumes that someone is horny first and then they experience pleasure. It works in the opposite order for most women. They need pleasure first, and then their brain gets interested and says, okay, sure, I'm down to stay at this party. This party's getting fun. I hear it all the time from clients. One of the main things that we look for when we are assessing this is the whole, well, I wasn't in the mood at first, but then I enjoyed myself as we got going because they had the sexy, fun stimulation to kick on the sex drive. And this is so important to know because it's important to not just be so quick to assume that there's a problem, that there's a desire problem, that there's something wrong with you, that there's something wrong with your partner. It's just that nobody ever taught you how this system works. So, who has ever heard this myth? This is a fun one. Who has ever heard that women just have naturally lower drive than men? Well, Aaron, it's biology. Like men just want sex more and women just don't want sex as much. Well, now you know that that's not true because you now understand that women's sex drive, the women's system, work differently. So it's often that it's just not recognized. But let's dive a little bit deeper into this one because when somebody is struggling with low desire, what happens is they tend to hyper focus in on the sex. It's almost like we have horse blinders on, right? How do I have more sex? How do I have better sex? How do I not take so long to get into the mood? Whatever it is. But it's not usually a sex problem. I know. You're thinking Aaron definitely feels like it when we're fighting about it and it's causing tension and issues, and I don't want to have sex because it's not fun, and I feel rejected all the time because my partner doesn't want to have sex. I know, I hear you, and I know that it feels like it. But think about your sex drive like a car. Because the reality is that your sex drive and many systems in your body are made up of activators and deactivators. So when you think about sexual response like a car, think about it like gas and brake pedals. What happens is that we try to lay on the gas, right? Having more sex, having better sex. But what's really happening is that there's too much pressure on the brakes. So that car isn't going anywhere. Right? It's like trying to drive when you're standing on the brake and the handbrake is engaged and there's cinder blocks in front of all the wheels. Right? You're just going to spin your wheels and burn out. We don't want that, right? So the order of events is really important here because it's not just about the gas, it's about the brakes. So let me give you an example because I think that will help you understand where I'm coming from with this and what this can look like, especially for women. So, what I mean when I say the gas and brakes and taking the pressure off of the brakes, one of the main brakes that I have found for women that is often overlooked or women really struggle to manage is stress. And I'm not talking about the emotion, right? Where you're like, things feel overwhelming and they feel chaotic. I'm talking about the physically activating nervous system response. It's your fight or flight. So you probably have heard about this before, but as a refresher, it comes from the days when we used to live out in the woods and we had to worry about a lion wandering into camp. And when that happened, you would do a split second assessment and you say, okay, I'm either going to run, I'm going to outrun this lion, or I'm going to fight it and kill it and we feast and everybody's happy. Happy, right? When that lion wanders into camp, it's a threat. So your body knows that that's not a good time to pop behind that tree, have some quick sex, hope that lion doesn't maul you to death. No! Your survival response and your sex drive can't be online at the same time. They're opposing systems. And this can be a 1-2 punch for women because one, any stress activates the system, right? And shuts down sex drive. You're stuck in traffic, you got deadlines, the never-ending emails, any of it, your body can't tell the difference. But two, when sex starts to cause stress, your brain starts to associate sex with a threat. Starts to say, well, sex is stressful, so I'm going to avoid that. We don't want to do things that stress us out. That is why we start avoiding sex when we're in this, right? That is why women start avoiding touch and eventually all affection because it sends them into this hypervigilant state because their brain has associated it with something that is stressful. Think about the impact on the relationship. If every time somebody asks a woman like to have sex and she has to say no and see the rejection and the hurt, that alone is a stressor. So we start to avoid it. Because fun fact, the largest sex organ that you have, men and women alike, is your brain. Controls the whole system. And when it has learned that sex is stressful right now, it tries to avoid the lion. That's why laying on the gas isn't getting you anywhere. It only makes things worse because the more you lay on that gas and it doesn't get you anywhere because the brakes are on, the more you think, well, maybe it's just me. Maybe there's something wrong with me. It makes things worse. You have to take the pressure off the brakes first. Arousal is a two-step process. Yes, it's turning on the ons and doing the things that are fun and pleasurable, but first it is turning off the offs, removing the blocks, getting the shit out of the way that doesn't feel good and is stressful. Make sense? Okay. All right, let's talk about another one of my favorites. Who has ever heard this myth? Women fake being too tired to get out of sex. We just fake it. It's an excuse, right? There is this perception that women are the gatekeepers, right? That they make excuses. They say, oh, not tonight. I'm too tired. I'm exhausted. I had a really long day. Well, first off, thinking about those breaks we just talked about, hell yes, I'm making excuses to get out of it when it is stressful and it's causing tension and it's causing pressure and it's not fun for me and I feel like I'm being a terrible partner. Yeah, there is a part of me that's going to make excuses to avoid that because that sucks. I'm not going to want to do it. But there's more to this idea of being too tired for sex because it's a really, really common thing that I see showing up in relationships when they're trying to navigate this. Because, fun fact, fatigue is the number one reason women say no to sex. Research has shown by a long shot. It's the number one reason women are like, no, I'm not into it. I don't want to do it. Why? Because fatigue literally suppresses sex hormones, shuts off the system. And women are much more affected by this biologically than men, so it can cause a whole lot of tension. Men don't feel the same way when they're tired. They're like, well, I can rally, like I can go for this. I still think it'd be fun. So like, what do you mean you can't? There's a lack of understanding that this affects men and women differently. A similar example to the biological impact of this is that how men struggle to pee when they have an erection. It's the same for women's sex drive and fatigue. They just don't work really at the same time. But the sexpectation here is that the system works the same for everyone. Sexpectation is that we all feel the same way, and the drive all feels the same way, and we all feel the same way in response to external stimulation and to internal stressors and fatigue, right? We all feel the same. No. But when we know what's going on, because even when arousal peaks, right, for men, arousal tends to peak at night. But for women, it tends to peak in the morning, right? We can troubleshoot around this. Maybe don't try having sex at night at the end of a long and stressful day because you know you're going to be fighting an uphill battle. Maybe try for the morning. Maybe try for the weekend when there's less going on, right? We can put a plan in place so that it's not just the judgment and now we're fighting about it because we feel like we're making excuses, we're feeling rejected, we're feeling hurt, we're feeling judged and blamed now. We can get rid of the judgment and the blame and actually brainstorm solutions, which can be very helpful in this in figuring out a path forward. Yeah? Okay. So let's talk about some of my favorite myths that happen during sex, because these ones are really, really common. So who has ever thought this one? Foreplay happens before sex. That's the myth, right? Foreplay happens before sex, and then you get to the good part, and the sex is like the bread and butter and that sort of. But foreplay, you could take it or leave it. It's not really that important. It's just this precursor that sometimes you do. No, foreplay is sex. And this is the best part for most women because the stimulation activates that responsive desire. It's the fun, sexy thing that kicks on the drive and helps them want to actually be there. And there's something that I call the 30-minute rule that I use with couples because for most women, they need about 30 minutes to fully get aroused. For some, it's less time. For some, it's more, but on average, around 30 minutes. And you need this time to preheat the oven because there's actually a lot of physical things happening that enhance this experience and make it more comfortable. And the more that we like something, the more we want to do it again, right? So this is a hack for if you want to have more sex in your relationship. Because during this 30-minute window, two really, really important things are happening for women. One is that lubrication is happening, right? Inside the vagina, so that there's not as much painful friction because we need to stop normalizing that painful sex is just normal for women and just happens. No, sex is not supposed to be painful. So that lubrication helps it be more comfortable and not painful, right? And the second thing that happens that you might not realize, lubrication is a little bit more well known, right? But the second thing that happens is called vaginal tenting. So what happens during this is that for women, their vagina literally expands and it tenses back up under their cervix, right? So what happens with this and why this is important is because it makes insertion a whole lot more comfortable. The body is literally expanding to make this a more pleasurable experience for her. So if you are skipping this window with the foreplay, at best, it's not super enjoyable because the system's not warmed up. At worst, it is painful and it is unenjoyable and it sucks and it reinforces that sex and stress association. Becomes that negative feedback loop. So couples need to slow down into this window to kick on the drive and actually enjoy the experience more. I know that this is so cliche, but it really is about the journey, not the destination here, right? Because if the journey sucks to get to the destination, I don't want to go on the trip again. And something that can help you when you're thinking about this, because even in this conversation, you might be thinking, well, it doesn't feel super important. It doesn't feel like sex. Whenever I talk about this with my couples, I say, okay, what are you doing during foreplay? And they'll say, oral. And I'll say, oral what? Oral sex. It's just a different way to think about it, right? But the sexpectation is that sex is penetration alone. There are so many different things that you could be doing to make this more fun and enjoyable for both of you, right? So slow down into the journey so that you actually want to go on that trip again. Okay. Another one of the biggest misconceptions that I hear from women, from men, from everyone, and I'm going to get some reactions from this one. I'm going to piss some people off because this is a big one. Who has ever thought this myth? That women should orgasm from penetration alone? hmm I can see reactions. Yes. I blame Hollywood fully for this one because those scenes are so unrealistic. It's always this like, I have to have you now, and we swipe everything off the counter, and like these wild positions always perfectly match up, and nobody ever needs lube, and nobody's hair ever gets in the way, and nobody ever gets an ass cramp. I mean, come on. And then it ends in these world shattering simultaneous orgasms from penetration alone. And yes, we know that these are not true. Intellectually, you know that movies are not real. But when we see that over and over again, when we read that in books over and over again, it reinforces that this is how it should work. This is how it should happen for women. This is the ideal. 90% of women need external stimulation to orgasm because this is where the majority of their nerves are. There's actually very few nerve touch endings in the vagina. The majority of them are on the clitoris and in the clitoris. And this specifically triggers more sex expectations than most other because women feel like they are less than if they can't orgasm like this, and men feel like they're not doing a good job. If their partners need toys or external stimulation, they think, well, I'm not able to give her an orgasm this way. And this is how women end up faking it. Because it's when it's hard to orgasm and you're afraid of hurting your partner's feelings, that's what happens. Because now it's this whole judgmental emotional thing in our brains when what's happening is that we're just not stimulating the right body parts. Right? The clitoris itself is misunderstood. We think about it like this optional add-on and might be fun. Yeah, I'll maybe get to it when it is the most important part of a woman's body for sexual pleasure. The most important. And it's not just some little button, right? Where you like ring the doorbell and you say, who's home? Like we think about it being, right? And it's not actually that hard to find. So let's stop talking about it like that. Let's stop normalizing the men have no idea what the clitoris is. Learn about the clitoris. This is a very important part of sexual response, but it's an entire internal structure. There's the glans, which has the majority of those nerves that we think about, right? It's that external piece when we think about the clit. It is a little button, right? And then there are crura and bulbs that go down and around the outside of the vagina. It's like a wishbone around the vagina, internal structure. So you can't see these parts. And if you are listening to the audio only, Google clitoris internal structure because you need to know what this looks like because it's fascinating. It is a whole structure. It's a whole body part that people don't know about. And fun fact with the clitoris, women get erections too. I know. Wild, right? When they are stimulated, the legs and the bulb that go down and around the vagina, like a wishbone internally, they engorge with blood and they swell and they increase in sensitivity. And does this sound familiar like any other body part? Like a penis, maybe? A lot of similarities, right? And this is what leads to orgasm for women, just like how stimulating a penis leads to orgasm for men. And research has shown that even when women orgasm from penetration, it's because they are internally stimulating those legs of the clitoris that go down and around the vagina. It's just internal stimulation. So all orgasms are clitoral orgasms. But there is a big lack of awareness around how, oh my goodness gracious, hold on. There we go. There is a big lack of awareness around how women's bodies work with this, right? This is not a part of the conversation. I mean, who didn't know that this is what the clit looks like? I didn't know for a super long time, for longer than I would like to admit, and I'm a woman. Like, women don't even know that this is what it's like. So, of course, our male partners are not going to know. And there was a really good quote. It stuck with me so much in a book I read. It was called Becoming Cliterate. It's about the orgasm gap by Lori Mintz. Highly recommend. It's very good. But she was talking about how the differences between men and women and what they need to orgasm. And she said that women orgasming from penetration alone is like men orgasming from ball stimulation alone. Like, yeah, you're in the right vicinity. It might feel good, it might feel real nice, but it's probably not going to be enough to get you there. So we don't need to judge it. We just need to understand it so that you can explore it in a different way. We just need to understand that there are differences in biology. So when someone doesn't orgasm from penetration alone, we know that that's not an internal factor of there being something wrong with you. It's not a judgment based on your performance. We can get rid of all those judgments because it's just biology, people. It's just biology, right? Just a body part. It needs to be stimulated. That's all. Okay. So now that we have set the record straight with all of these myths, which is so fun. I could go on for hours and hours, but we'll stop there for now. I want to talk about a couple of things that I think can be really helpful for couples to do to enhance their intimate connection and make this sustainable in the long run so that you have something to take away from this, okay? So, what I have found in my work is that there are four main things that women and their partners need to do to enhance their sex lives. Number one is that they need to learn what type of sex drive they have. It's really, really important because these systems work differently. So, it's important to know which type you both have. I developed a quiz to help with this because it's hard to find this information and figure out which type you have. But this helps couples be on the same page about how these work and clearly communicate what they need from each other and understand what they need from each other. And for women, this is the main piece to them not feeling broken, to feeling more in control, to stop judging themselves for their sex drive and how this works. And it helps men understand what's going on and not just feel like she doesn't love you anymore. So understanding your sex drive, essential. Number two, it is so important to lower that nervous system activation, take the pressure off those brakes. And this isn't just important for sexual health, this is important for overall health because this has really serious effects on us long term when we're in this overactive, hypervigilant state. There's digestive issues, there's sleep problems, heart disease, stroke. It's really serious. And we talk about stress like it's just this normal thing. No, we need to stop normalizing it and get systems in place to soothe the body out of this so that we can have better health and well-being, sex specifically, and also just in day-to-day life. So we need to take the pressure off of those brakes first, and then it's easier to discover your actual arousal triggers. I call this going from sex expectations to sexploration. Think about it like love languages for arousal. Everybody likes different things, so it's important to know what language you're both speaking so you can be on the same page. Because what turns you on is probably different than what turns your partner on. And it's also probably different on different days because you're a dynamic individual. And for women, their sensitivity and their reactivity, physical reactivity, changes based on where they're at in the cycle. So it's important to know this for yourself and for navigating this with your partner. It's important to explore this and take the pressure off. Emily Nagoski, who is the author of Come As You Are, who also wrote a new book called Come Together. In her new book, she talks about how pleasure is the measure. She is a sex researcher who has done a lot of research into this, especially women's sex drive and how this shows up in couples. And she says pleasure is the measure of a good sex life. That is it. It's not the sex expectations and how often and how long. It's are you enjoying yourself? And this is the most important piece because when we enjoy things, we want to do them again. So if you want to have more sex, it needs to be enjoyable because we don't want to do things that stress us out, right? Okay. And number four, a really important part of this in relationships is to work on this as a team. Be in this together. A lot of women will come to me and they will say, this feels like it's my problem to fix. This feels like a me problem. Because what often happens is the men don't know what's going on, right? And they might be feeling rejected and hurt, so they step back. But also, what usually happens in good relationships is they're like, I don't want to add pressure and I don't want to add to the stress. And like, since I don't know what's going on because I'm in the mood, like, I'll just step back so that you can figure this out. And I am here to help whenever you need me. But that perpetuates this cycle because what that indicates is that there's something wrong with you that you need to fix, and I'm here to help. This isn't my problem. When at the end of the day, sex is a co-created experience. It's a shared experience. Yes, it is important for all of us to know how our sex drive works and how it responds, but sex itself is a shared experience. You're doing this together. So you need to talk about it. You both need to bring your own ideas because nobody is a mind reader. Nobody knows what's going to work for the other person. You need to be open to trying new things together to get a different result. Because the reality is that women cannot fix this on their own because it's a shared experience. They can work on stimulating their drive, but they can't fix this relational experience on their own. It's like communication, right? Say you're having communication issues in your relationship. You can't just change what you're doing and it changes how your partner communicates and fixes all their issues and makes it super. No, you both have to step into that because it's a dynamic between the two of you. Nobody's a mind reader. So the only way for this to get better is to work on this as a team. Because at the end of the day, that's probably what you want. You want more connection and you want deeper intimacy. So it is important to step into this, even if you don't know what to do, that's okay. But to be in this together, to troubleshoot together. Okay. So I threw a lot at you today. So just as a quick and dirty recap, sex expectations, bad. Throw them out. Aim for sex exploration. And remember that there are two types of sex drive, right? One is spontaneous, where my desire leads to my arousal, right? My mental interest leads to my physical interest. And one is responsive, where my arousal leads to my desire. It's my physical interest that leads to my mental interest. And having different sex drive is normal. This is a lot more common in relationships than having the same type. So if you have different types, congratulations, you're in the majority, right? They're similar systems, but they just work in different directions. So be aware of this. And it's important to take the pressure off the brakes before you lay on the gas. Remember, that car is not going to go anywhere if all the brakes are on. So take the brakes off first, then lay on the gas. And part of laying on the gas is foreplay. Remember that foreplay is the shit. It's where it's at. So enjoy it. And do not forget about the clit because that is the most important piece for women's pleasure and arousal and orgasm. And at the end of the day, work as a team and be in this together. Yes, it can be hard when there are differences, when this is causing stress, when this is causing tension. But at the end of the day, you want it to be me and you versus the problem, versus the stressor, not me versus you. So unite against the stressor, unite against the problem, and brainstorm together so that you can solve this together. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me. I had such a blast. I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned some helpful facts, some interesting facts about women's anatomy and arousal. I love this stuff. I could talk about it all day. And my contact information is here for you. So reach out if you have any questions, if you want to talk more, if you want strategies, I'm here to help. Right? I love this stuff. My mission on this planet is to help women see that they are not broken. They just need to know how this works and they need different strategies and help couples navigate this better so they can have deeper connection and intimacy. So sex can be something that brings them together and is fun and pleasurable, not something that's stressful and drives them further apart. So thank you again for coming. I had so much fun and I will see you next time. Bye.